Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Are you guys red pilled? There's been a lot of controversy about this red pill ideology or movement, and I wanted to respond to this idea of red pill. Is it something that Muslims can accept? Is it basically like the worst thing ever, the most evil, misogynistic, satanic thing ever? Or is it this amazing guide to life that all Muslims should adopt? Where does the truth really lie about red pill? I'm going to give a lot of points about red pill, its history, its background, its context, and there is too much for me to really cover in this video. We're going to cover a lot in future Alesna courses if you want in-depth knowledge about red pill, feminism, the history of these ideas. But for the purpose of this video, I want to make it valuable enough, inshallah, where you can get a lot of information and insights. But keep in mind that it's not going to be a comprehensive history. And inshallah, if there's a need for it or there's a demand, then we'll have more about red pill in the future and feminism, of course. So before getting into it, there are some background things that we have to keep in mind about red pill. First of all, it is depicted as this misogynistic hatred of women. It's heavily maligned, and it's really ruthlessly, unfairly in many cases, being attacked in the mainstream media. It's being censored. It's associated with radicalism, and you even have government agencies who will have this designation of red pill being partly extremist or having this kind of radical affiliation. So this makes it very controversial to talk about, and it's also being censored on social media. So I've been a subject of censorship with things that are adjacent or related to the quote-unquote red pill themes. You know, I had a video about some of these issues that was actually blocked and deleted from Facebook. I don't know why. There wasn't anything really that violated any community guidelines, but it was nonetheless deleted. And this was, I think 2 or 3 years back. So it's heavily being censored and people are attacked for being associated with it. So we have to keep that background in mind. We're not on a neutral playing field talking fairly about these issues. There's a huge bias against this kind of red pill, quote unquote, ideology or movement. The other thing to recognize is that many Muslims are part of this context. So you find imams maybe, or du'at, or speakers who will talk about red pill, or they will criticize red pill. We have to realize that with this Muslim dawah scene and what we can call big dawah, or as I've called it in the past, the dawah mafia, they have a very heavy bias towards feminism. And there's partly a profit motive for supporting feminism and basically attacking anything that contradicts feminism. And this is why we see a lot of these institutes, for example, or these compassionate imams, unfit imams, crypto reformists, putting out positions that are completely contrary to Islam, but support a feminist understanding of Islam. So part of that is just they have become feminists. Part of it is there's a profit motive. They have mostly females funding them. And this is like a known fact with consumer market reports, is that most of the consumer spending that happens in the world is by women. And they dominate. Over 80% of consumer spending is at the hands of women. And Muslim organizations also realize this, that people who are making the donations, people who are going to the classes, buying the classes, there is definitely more women, Muslim women doing this. So the whole dawah scene, not the whole dawah scene, but big dawah, these compassionate imams, these crypto reformists, they are pandering in many cases to a female audience. So is it a surprise that some of them will come out harshly against quote unquote red pill? They'll come out harshly against this idea of men's rights and so forth. It's not a surprise. It's not a surprise that some of them would do this. Another disclaimer before we get into it is that many of the critics of red pill, frankly, are confused and they really don't understand what red pill means. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the intellectual background. As from my background, I've been studying feminism and liberalism for 17 years, about 17 to 18 years. I've been studying red pill and following these trends for the past 5 years. And I consider myself well educated on the history of this movement and on its background. I teach about this at Alesta in different courses. I teach about feminism. Obviously, you have written about it. And you can find all of this stuff on my social media on muslimskeptic.com. What I'm seeing is that some of the people who are even advocating red pill, they call themselves red-pilled Muslims. Even they do not really understand what they're promoting and the ideas that they're promoting. They seem to not really get the bigger picture. So the advocates of red pill and the critics of red pill, from what I've seen, it's quite superficial. It's quite superficial, and we'll see why that is throughout this video, inshallah. So with those disclaimers in mind, let's look at the question of what is red pill? What is red pill? Is it a movement? Is it an ideology? I'm going to distinguish these things. I'm going to say that you have the content of red pill. Whatever is associated with red pill, there's content. So there are books, there are articles, there are videos, ideas, discussions. That's the content of red pill. And then there's a movement, because there are activists. There are men's rights activists who might be considered part of this movement, like a social movement. So I'm not as much concerned with the movement. I'm concerned about the ideas. So that's why I'm going to be focusing on in this movement. We're trying to critique ideas. We're trying to evaluate ideas. But how would I characterize red pill? Like, what would I say red pill is about in a nutshell? This is my definition. Red pill is a rediscovery of basic common sense patriarchy. Red pill is about the wisdom of patriarchy. And what is patriarchy? Patriarchy means the leadership of men. The leadership of men and the inherent value of manhood in society, in family, and in civilization overall. This is what red pill is concerned with. So there are many ideas associated with red pill, many ideologies even, values even associated. But what's the core? What is the core of this red pill content? The core, in my view, is a rediscovery of the basic common sense patriarchy and the wisdom of patriarchy. So the implication of this definition is that red pill is not a new ideology. Red pill is not new. It's not something that's 10 years old, 5 years old, 20 years old, 100 years old. This is something that is as old as humanity itself, because humanity has been patriarchal from the beginning. And patriarchy is embedded in human nature. This is significant. When we look throughout human civilization, 99% of all human civilization has been patriarchal. Men have been leaders, men have been in charge. And you can look at an ethnographic atlas, you can look at the anthropological studies. There are small tribes here and there in different parts of the world, hardly accessible to civilization, that are matriarchal, where women are the leaders. Those societies are 1%, and they're all small, isolated, and many of them have been lost throughout history because these societies don't last. Matriarchal societies don't last. 99% of societies have been patriarchal, and Islam endorses this leadership of men. No matter how many feminist sheikhas and ustazas want to deny it, Islam is patriarchal because Islam endorses and promotes and requires the leadership of men. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Clear statement. Nothing could be more explicit in the Quran by Allah. الرجال, men, are qawam, over, ala nisa, over women. And what does qawam mean? People want to say qawam means, oh, you're the caretakers of women. You're the caretakers. You just, tidy up the house and you take care, make sure they're happy. Basically, that translation of qawam as caretaker means you're like a servant. You're just serving women. And whatever they need, here you go, master, here you go. That's the way that they're translating qawam. But this is not the meaning of qawam. They are mistranslating and deceiving Muslims by translating qawam as being caretakers. Yes, taking care and having concern and helping and being merciful and loving is a requirement of leadership. It's a requirement of qawama. But it's only a component of it. The other component arguably the essential component of qawama, is leadership, is being an authority. Men are authorities over women. And if you read the tafasir, everything is so clear, crystal clear in our tradition about the meaning of qawama. So translating as caretaker, this is a distortion. So this means, in a nutshell, that patriarchy is embedded in Islam. It's required by Islam. So many ayat, so many hadith emphasize this. Whether it's in the family, the man is the head of the household, according to Islam. According to Islam, the Khalifa is a man, the head of the community, the leader of the community, the Amir is a man. This is required by Islam. So the sooner that you recognize this, and the sooner that you acknowledge this, and how important it is in Islam, the better. Don't be in denial. You need to, once you accept this, then you can start understanding it, and then you can go on the journey of recognizing the wisdom of this. The sooner you accept it, the better. If you want to continue to be in denial about it, then you're missing out. You're not really understanding Islam. You're not understanding the structure of Islam, the structure of the society that Islam wants to build, the family that Islam wants to build. Patriarchy is embedded within Islam. And so this means that if the main core idea of Red Pill is the common sense of patriarchy and the wisdom of patriarchy, then that main idea is endorsed in strong terms by Islam. Simple as that. And Muslims themselves, throughout Muslim civilization, and even to this day, we could describe Muslims as being red-pilled. Muslims around the world are red-pilled. Your parents might be red-pilled. If you're not red-pilled, maybe your parents are red-pilled. Maybe your grandparents are red-pilled. Muslim cultures are red-pilled because they're patriarchal. And many of the things that are now being said by these red-pill YouTubers or book writers or whatever, they're just repeating things or saying things that we already have in Islam, and we've been practicing in Islam since the beginning. So, there's one statement that I remember male family members of myself made. So I'm from an Iranian Persian background, and I heard male family members, religious family members, talking about this half plus 7 rule. You know what the half plus 7 rule is? The half plus 7 rule says that if you are a man and you're looking for a wife, what is a general guideline for the age gap that you should be looking for? And the general idea is take your age, cut it by half, and add 7. So if you're a 40-year-old man, you cut that age by half, add 7, becomes 27. 27, around that's a good age gap to look for. So I was like, okay, whatever. This is the idea that they're spreading, but this is something that would be considered red-pilled. And you find non-Muslims are advocating this kind of age gap, and how do you find a suitable wife, and what is going to be the best marriage for you, blah, blah, blah. So were my relatives in Iran, were they on YouTube watching these red pillars? Were they on the forums reading this stuff? No, but many aspects of Muslim culture retain these themes that are found within Red Pill, and they're patriarchal. Now, not everything about Islamic culture is correct, or Muslim culture, I should say. There are many cultural practices that are contrary to Islam in these Muslim countries. But other things are perfectly in conformity and are a product of Islam. And some of these things fall into that category. The point that I'm trying to make is that Red Pill is something that is not foreign to Islam. In fact, the core of it is something that Islam actually endorses. And so what we realize is that Westerners, because of the influence of feminism, they have lost touch with the wisdom of patriarchy. They have lost touch with the value of patriarchy and the importance of masculinity and masculine leadership. They've lost touch with that, and they're in the process of rediscovering it on their own. That's basically what Red Pill is. Muslims, alhamdulillah, we haven't forgot. As long as we're practicing Islam, we shouldn't have forgotten the value of patriarchy. Unfortunately, you have people who have been liberalized. You have organizations that have been liberalized. You have government programs. You've heard of RAND, the RAND report, and the RAND strategy for modernizing and secularizing Muslims. basically turning us into feminists, pro-LGBT, whatever. Well, these programs are trying to get Muslims to lose touch with the value of patriarchy that is embedded within the Sharia and in Islam as a whole. So that's why you have Muslims who are shocked by Redpill or think, oh my God, what is this shocking nonsense? This is misogyny. This is contrary to Islam. This is against the Quran and Sunnah. Now, there are aspects of, as I'm going to go into, people who associate with Redpill that are saying un-Islamic things, downright detestable things, highly objectionable things they're saying. And we're going to denounce that in a minute. But the core of what is being, the core themes, the core content of Redpill aligns with Islam, and non-Muslims are rediscovering, they're in the process of rediscovering the wisdom of patriarchy. So this becomes a huge dawah opportunity. A huge dawah opportunity, because we can say, look, you're trying to figure this out using your limited mind, your limited intellect. We have guidance here from your creator, from my creator. The creator has sent us guidance, and it's endorsing the best things that you're discovering. You're trying to discover in this clumsy kind of way, and for everything that you get right, you get 10 things wrong. We have the guide right here, the guidance. It's Islam. Become Muslim. We want to invite you to Islam. And some of these non-Muslims have actually recognized, and they praise Islam. And there is this meme that went viral some years back. It's called "Islam is right about women." Islam is right about women. So they're praising Islam on this basis, on how Islam rejects feminism. Islam is patriarchal. They've even recognized it. So this is an opportunity. Even with certain Orthodox Muslim societies and certain movements and certain political events that have happened recently in 2021, they're praising, these Muslims, these bearded Muslims wearing turbans, wearing traditional Sunnah clothing, and they're praising these Muslims, saying these are Chads. Okay, a Chad, meaning that you are someone who is strong and admirable and confident, and you are. This is something that, the peak of praise for Redpill is to call someone a Chad. They're calling Muslims Chads. So this is a great opportunity for dawah. Everyone should be open for dawah. Even feminists, liberals, LGBT, everyone. We invite everyone to Islam. Okay, but you have some compassionate imams who say, no, we don't give dawah to these people. We boycott them and we ignore them. Cancel culture. Supposedly, cancel culture is a bad thing, but we have to cancel people that are politically incorrect, according to these compassionate imams. Anyway, so you have these Muslims who unfortunately are brainwashed by feminism. They don't understand Redpill. They just criticize. They make these stupid videos about Redpill. They don't know what they're talking about. They're hurting basic dawah efforts, and they're maligning something that they really don't understand. What's the history of Redpill? I can't get into a full history, but I'm going to give some highlights and some important points. So the history of Redpill cannot be understood without understanding the history of feminism. So Redpill as a movement in terms of people criticizing feminism, that's what Redpill is, promoting patriarchy in contrast to feminism. You can't understand that history unless you understand the history of feminism. Feminism began in the 17th century, and it corresponded with industrialization and modernization in Europe, and then in the United States. And so feminism was used primarily as a tool for colonialism, as well as certain educational reforms. People saying that, we need to educate our women so that they can enter the workforce, so that they can increase the GDP, they can increase the productivity of society. Feminism was used in these two kinds of roles: as a colonial project to justify the invasion of Muslim lands, of Chinese lands, of native lands. Feminism was used as a justification. How so? You had people like John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, Montesquieu, Condorcet, all of these different liberal philosophers in the 17th and 18th century who said that, look, the West is superior because we have civilization, and we have civilization because we educate our women. We have women going into the workforce. We treat our women by this standard. That's why we're civilized. But look at these backwards Muslims. Look at these backwards Native Americans. Look at these primitive Chinese, primitive Aboriginals, primitive Africans. They will veil their women, or they will practice polygyny, man having more than one wife, or they will, say that a woman has to serve her husband or serve her in-laws, or the Chinese, they have foot binding, this practice of foot binding, which is actually a very bad practice. So they used, these Europeans used this idea of the victimized native women being suppressed, being subjugated. This justifies the enlightened European powers to colonize, to invade and liberate these poor women, bring these women to the light of liberal democracy and feminism and so forth. And equality, liberty, equality, and progress. This is our burden as white Europeans, the white man's burden. This is where it comes from. We have the burden of civilizing these savages. So feminism was a critical part of the colonial project. It was a tool of colonialism. All of these backwards misogynistic societies, we need to bring them to the light of reason. And in fact, the term patriarchy was coined not by some feminist, first wave feminist woman. It was coined by a man, white man, actually, Henry Maine, in his book Ancient Law. And then you had Frederick Engels, another white philosopher, who also used this term in his The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and State, published in 1884. So they're the ones who are coining this term of patriarchy as something bad, as something backwards, as something misogynistic, where you have men as leaders. Men are the ones who are being educated. Men have authority exclusively when it comes to the state, when it comes to family, and so forth. So they are using this as an attack on not just Muslim society, on any non-Western, non-European society. All people need to be colonized so that they can be brought into the light of reason, into the light of progress, into the light of civilization. We want to create a utopia across the globe, a world utopia. And it's these backwards misogynistic cultures and religions that are holding us back from that beautiful goal. We have to invade in order to enlighten them. So then this is the origin of feminism. When people talk about the origin of feminism with the first wave of feminism, they'll talk about people like Susan B. Anthony, Lucy Stone, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, these figures in the 19th century, towards the end of the 19th century. That's not really the beginning of feminism. Feminists started with people like John Stuart Mill, arguably John Locke, people like Jeremy Bentham, people in that era, which is at least 100 years prior to the first wave of feminism. So if you're ignoring that 150-year history and you're saying that Susan B. Anthony and so forth, they're the first wave, that's when feminism started, you don't really understand feminism. And you don't understand the purpose of feminism. We have to understand feminism as a tool of colonialism and an attack on patriarchy. If you attack patriarchy, you're attacking Islam. And we're going to get to this, like the difference between red pill and feminism. They're both bad ideologies, so why are you defending one and you attack another, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm going to address that very specifically. But you have to recognize what is the core purpose and the core content, not only theoretically, but what was actually practiced of feminism. It is an attack on patriarchy. And when you look at people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Lucy Stone, all of these first wave feminists, they were anti-family. They were anti-religion, they were rabidly atheists. Or at least they were rabidly anti-organized religion. That's a more accurate statement. Maybe some of them believed in God, but they all hated, or the prominent figures of first wave feminism, they absolutely hated organized religion, including Islam. Some of them explicitly mention Islam, but mainly Christianity, but Islam is also included, because they said that these religions are what are upholding patriarchy. These religions, they uphold patriarchy and they allow the continuation of patriarchy. So if we want to destroy patriarchy, we have to destroy religion. This is the first wave of feminism. Okay? What's called the first wave. What I just said is that there are feminists who preceded. They weren't called feminists, and they didn't necessarily call themselves feminists, but the ideas that they're advocating are the same ideas of feminism, what's known as feminism. That, women are oppressed, women don't have this, women don't have that, there's not perfect equality of the sexes, so we have to invade and kill and destroy. So at the beginning of this first wave, at the end of the 19th century, this is also when we can say Red Pill as a movement started. Red Pill as a reaction to feminism. From the very beginning, you had this kind of reaction to feminists in the 19th century. And what they're saying is that, look, you are attacking our institutions, you are attacking religion, you are attacking family, and this is bad. This is going to destroy us. And they kind of critique their argument. So an example of this is Ernest Belfort Bax. He wrote The Legal Subjection of Men in 1896. And his whole point is that this idea that men are oppressing women is a lie. If anything, men are being oppressed by women. So he makes this kind of argument. It's an interesting book. It was more like a pamphlet, but he writes about 60, 70 pages, The Legal Subjection of Men. So he would be considered a kind of red pill writer. You had the League of Men's Rights. So the men's rights movement. This was in the 1920s. They started different leagues to oppose the feminists, to oppose the feminist project. Throughout the 20th century, you had many different groups like this. In 1971, a very interesting book that I recommend, it's on my recommended reading list, by Esther Villar. Esther Villar. She is Argentinian German, and she wrote this interesting book called The Manipulated Man. The Manipulated Man. And it's a very interesting book. I don't endorse everything that she says in that book, but it's a critique of feminism. And it's saying that women are portrayed as these powerless victims, the victims of the stronger man. But in fact, women use their minds and they use emotional manipulation to control men and to get what they want from men. And it's women that have all this power. So I think there's a lot of good points in that. I don't agree with the entire thesis, but there's a lot of good points. This was written in 1971, Esther Villar. So she's like a red pill author, even though that term hadn't been invented yet. And there was actually a TV debate that she had with a feminist. And Esther Villar was so hated by these feminists. Like, they made death threats against her. This is a woman, and she's writing this. They're making death threats about her. And I mean, the history of Red Pill, as I'm depicting it, had a lot of women involved in it. There were a lot of women who are like, right, this feminist movement is poison, it's cancer. Women can appreciate, like Muslim women, especially when you have the Quran saying it, Allah is saying it, the Prophet ﷺ is practicing it, the Sahaba, all of the ulama across the schools of thought, they're promoting patriarchy. As a Muslim woman, you too should recognize the value of patriarchy and the danger of feminism, the destruction that feminism has wrought and will continue to wreak on the entire globe. 1975, another quote-unquote red pill, Herb Goldberg, The Hazards of Being Male, Surviving the Myth of Masculine Privilege. Very interesting book. 1993, we're getting closer to modern day. Warren Farrell. Warren Farrell is an American author. He wrote a very important book called The Myth of Male Power. The Myth of Male Power. Again, I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says. But this idea that it's a myth to think that men just oppress and dominate women for the sake of their own benefit, just so that they can, make money or kick back and relax at the expense of women. The reality is that men are beneficent. Men want to protect women. Men, think about it. If you're a Muslim man, or if you're a Muslim woman, if you're a Muslim man, do you want to oppress your wife? Do you want to subjugate her? Do you want to oppress your mother? Your mother is a woman. Do you want to oppress her? Your daughter, do you want to oppress your daughter? Or do you want your daughter to marry a man who will oppress her and subjugate your daughter? Is that what you want? Or how about your nieces? Do you want them to be oppressed? Or your cousins? Your female cousins, do you want them to be oppressed and to be subjugated as a man? If you are, according to feminism, you're a man, so you inherently want these people in your life, these women in your life, to be oppressed, and you just sit back and enjoy. You're benefiting from the patriarchy. This is the message of feminism. And the message of feminism to women is that you should be suspicious of all the men in your life. You should be suspicious of all men in general, because secretly they want to oppress you and to take advantage of you and lie to you for their own benefit. Are there men who are jerks? Are there men who are abusive? Are there men who are actually tyrants and oppressive? Yeah, there are. Of course, no one denies that. And similarly, there are women who are also very manipulative, very evil, very oppressive. That's not something exclusively to men. So but the argument of feminism is that no, patriarchy is systematically oppressing women. Patriarchy is benefiting men at the expense of women. It's a systematic structural problem. This is the core thesis of feminism. And it's contrary to Islam. It's contrary to human nature. And these red pill authors are pointing that out. Some of them better than others, some of them in a way that's more acceptable Islamically than others, but nonetheless. So Warren Farrell, the myth of male power. Warren Farrell was a feminist himself. He was like a kind of, we would use the word simp, and we'll define that word in a minute. But he was a feminist. He was a hardcore feminist. He was like a card-carrying member of the feminist movement, literally. But then he rejected that movement, and he said, look, I realize that there's a lot of injustice that's happening to men because of this feminist movement. And he started writing his book. He has a lot of books, but the main one is The Myth of Male Power, published in 1993. So what about this so-called manosphere? So people, when they talk about red pill, they're not really thinking about this long history that I'm talking about, going back to the 19th century. They're talking about the manosphere, like the present day online blogs. This started, in the mid-90s with the rise of the internet. Immediately, you have these groups, these men's rights figures and groups going and bashing feminism, arguing against feminism. That has happened since the beginning of the internet. And you had a lot of different blogs dedicated to counteract feminism. You had this main blog that's called A Voice for Men. It was established in 2009. You had different figures like Paul Elam, Rollo Tomasi, Roger Devlin, Leonard Sachs, Susan Venker, Camille Paglia, Cassie J, Karen Strahan, many people, many different figures that have been writing and speaking and have been part of this, what's now called Red Pill movement. And these people, by the way, they don't all agree with each other. Some of them argue, viscerally, or not viscerally, but vociferously against each other. So that's, it's a diverse movement, but they're all dedicated to this one central theme that I keep emphasizing of opposing feminism and supporting these aspects of men's authority, men's rights. In 2014, you had a big social media movement, went viral, Women Against Feminism. Women protesting against feminism, that happened in 2014. In 2016, you had this documentary called The Red Pill. It is an interesting documentary. I recommend that you do watch it. I don't agree with everything that's in that documentary, especially the last part, because of the last part, they start going off against circumcision. They say circumcision is genital mutilation, and they oppose circumcision for boys. So obviously, as Muslims, we don't agree with that. But that is, some of these red pill people are advocating for banning circumcision. So obviously, we don't agree with that, and we will oppose them on that point. But the documentary as a whole, I recommend watching it and stream it, and you'll see a lot of the points that these men's rights activists will make. And I think a lot of you will agree with a lot of their points. Even people who so-called, or are critics of Red Pill, there are certain points that you can't deny. Like, how can you deny the fact that the family courts in Western countries and increasingly in the Muslim world have a bias towards women? They grant custody to women, like the mother in divorce cases, they grant custody in over 90% of cases. How is that just? And maybe if you know any brother who is divorced, many of them come to me actually and say, like, I was basically done so much injustice to, and I'm suffering a great deal because my children have been taken away from me for no basis, on no basis. In fact, one brother, his ex-wife was a drug addict. His ex-wife was a drug addict and alcoholic, and she still was able to retain custody of the children, even though he was, law-abiding citizen, no criminal record, no history of any kind of violation or abuse. But just because he's a man, he doesn't get custody. So all of these problems with family courts, divorce courts, all of the problems with sentencing in general. Why is it the case that men are given much harsher sentences than women for the same exact crime? This is a documented statistic that within Western courts, and the US court system especially, a man and a woman can be convicted for the same crime, but judges are giving much harsher sentences to punishments, basically, to the men. How is that just? How is that fair? If you claim that men and women are perfectly equal and that the law does not discriminate, if you claim that. Or the fact that, look at most suicides. The majority of suicides are men. Is that a problem? Should it be perfectly equal? Why aren't feminists taking up this cause? Anyway, all of these points fall under the umbrella of men's rights. Men's rights. So there are different factions within this Red Pill movement. You have the men's rights camp. You also have another group called Haqiqatjou. It's an acronym. MGTOW stands for Men Going Their Own Way. This is another faction. Haqiqatjou don't agree with men's rights on everything. I'll explain. Then you have incels. Incels, involuntary celibates. That's another group, another faction. Let's talk about that in a second. You have PUA, pickup artists. They have a lot of objectionable and false things, just like some of these other factions, but that's another group, PUA. So, you have many of these strands, you have many of these individuals. They're all criticizing feminism, but all of them have problems, but the core idea is something that we agree with. So all of the people I mentioned, all the factions that I mentioned, I'm not endorsing any of them. I'm not saying go and be a follower of, Paul Elam. Go be a follower of, Suzanne Venker. Go be a follower of Camille Paglia. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we can look at what they're saying and we can evaluate. And what are the conditions for that, actually? We'll get into that too, inshallah. So what are the different strands? Let me go in more detail. So there's the men's rights movement, men's rights activists. They focus on prison sentences, family court, differences between men and women in terms of paternal leave at work, suicide rates. Why is it men who are required to go fight in wars? Like there's mandatory enlistment into the army if you're a male, but there's not mandatory enlistment for women. How is that equality? Okay, so their main argument, these men's rights camp, that modern liberal society would be great if we had true equality between men and women. True equality. So basically, their standard of what is a utopia, what is a great society, keep everything the same with the modern world. Keep everything the same, but we just need actual equality. Treat men and women actually equal. This is what they're advocating. Do we agree with this as Muslims? No. The problems with the liberal modern society are very deep and very caustic. These are deep problems, a deep sickness when you reject your creator and when you reject the Sharia, you reject the law that your creator commands. This is causing big problems when you secularize. So things are not going to be better and improve. All of these things that human beings are suffering from when it comes to the breakdown of family, when it comes to the breakdown of communities, when it comes to the lack of marriage, the skyrocketing divorce rates, the suicide rate, the depression, all of those things, a lot of it is caused by equality, actually. A lot of it is caused by equalizing the relationship between men and women and destroying gender roles. So this men's rights movement, even though we would agree with certain things, like on family courts especially, like why are family courts so oppressive and unjust towards men? Yeah, I think that's a very good point. But this idea that equality is the standard that we should be striving towards, no, that's not something that we would accept. Then there's another group. So think of men's rights as like the most normie of all red pill. Like it's it should be the least controversial for people who have feminist tendencies. You'll have feminists who will agree. Like, yeah, you're right. You make a good point. We need true equality. We should make sure everyone is equal and everything is equal. So that's like the low level. Then you get a little bit higher. You get to these Haqiqatjous, men going their own way. What they say is that men are inherently harmed by their relationships with women. Men are inherently harmed, like having a relationship with a woman through marriage or as a girlfriend or whatever, men are taken advantage of in those relationships. Men have to give, and women just take and take and take. Gibs, basically, is the term that they use. So men need to go their own way. Forget about getting married. Forget about having these relationships. Just go, enjoy life. You'll have so much more money because you're not spending it on this blood-sucking woman. You'll have so much more time. You'll get to enjoy your hobbies. You'll get to enjoy hiking and traveling and, all your hobbies, video gaming. You'll get to enjoy life because women aren't there to mess it all up. This is Haqiqatjou, men going their own way. This is also something that we don't agree with. And it is kind of laughable because, I mean, there are memes because other red pill guys will make memes about Haqiqatjou, and they'll show, because it's just funny. Like, how can you deny that men need women? We need women. We need not just, I don't mean just physically. We need them in terms of our happiness. There's a reason that Allah created Adam and Eve and his spouse, Hawa. There's a reason. We need a spouse. We need someone to love and to care about. That's part of men's happiness. To spend on those that you love is so important. It's one of the sweetnesses of life. To care for someone and to cherish them. This is one of the sweetnesses, beauty of life. So this idea of you're going to be happy by going camping without women and like enjoying your hobbies, this is laughable. This is like, you're not going to be happy in that. And there are other like non-Muslim incels basically and others who laugh at Haqiqatjou, and they say like, you're deluded in promoting this idea of just go your own way, essentially be celibate. Yeah, of course. Like, that's not the solution to the problems that feminism has caused. It's to just abandon women. That's not the solution. So Haqiqatjou, again, they have interesting complaints about feminism, but their solution is laughable, and we should reject that. So what about these incels? Involuntarily celibate. These are guys who, they want to have a relationship. They want to be involved with the opposite sex, but they can't. They just can't find someone. And these people are being mocked. They're being mocked, and that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that they're being mocked because it is a real problem. People are not able to get married. People aren't, and it's not just a Muslim problem. So if you watch the debate that I had recently with that snail guy, I'm not going to dignify his name by naming him, but I mentioned all the stats. I'm not going to rehash it here, but even non-Muslims who don't want to get married, they're just not able to form relationships, stable relationships. They're not having intimate relations. They're not getting into relationships in general, and they're not getting married. This is an epidemic of forced celibacy. So the incels this is a good point. They have pointed to the reality that anyone, you don't have to be an incel to recognize. You can be a happily married man. I'm a happily married man, alhamdulillah. But I recognize the plight of humanity and people, and Muslims, many Muslim youth. If you're a Muslim youth, you can viscerally relate to this. How hard is it for you to find a good husband or a good wife? How hard is it? What is causing that? What? This is something new. Did your parents have this much trouble? Did your grandparents have this much trouble finding a spouse, getting into a happy relationship of marriage? No, they didn't. This is a new problem. What's causing that? So you have some of the Red Pill movement that are trying to diagnose it. There's one figure who's very popular on YouTube called Kevin Samuels. His name is Kevin Samuels. He's like a relationship coach. And he has a big YouTube channel, millions of views on his videos. And he is primarily talking to African American community, but his advice applies across the board. He's saying one of the major problems is that women have this inflated sense of their self-worth. They think that they deserve Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise and LeBron James, and their expectation for a husband is just way off the charts in terms of what they think that they deserve, given what they bring to the table themselves. So, I'm not saying go and watch Kevin Samuels' videos, okay, because there's some stuff that's very objectionable about what he says because he's not Muslim. But the main thing that he's saying, that women have this inflated expectation, or they delay marriage. They prioritize career and education, and then they start looking for marriage when they're in their late 30s and 40s. And they still think that they can get married and have children. And yeah, it's possible. It's possible, but you're really harming your chances of being able to find a husband when you've delayed it to that extent. Because biologically, there's only a certain age by which you can have children. And after a certain point, it becomes very hard to have children. The fact that feminism and liberal society is constantly telling women, get educated, get that PhD, get, the high paying job, go into these professions, forget about kids, forget about marriage. That's just patriarchy. That's just nonsense. What they do when they do that and promote this delay of marriage is that they are driving a lot of women, first of all, into zina, because they're not getting married, but they're still sexually active. So that's a huge problem. They're also basically ensuring that people can't have solid marriages, stable marriages. They're guaranteeing that many of these women will not even be able to find a husband to get married. It's very sad. It's very sad. I want everyone to be able to live happily with their spouse in a halal marriage and enjoy. This is one of the beauties of life that Allah has created, is to enjoy your spouse, to have romantic love with the opposite sex. This is something that is beautiful, but feminism is destroying that. So someone who is red-pilled, like Kevin Samuels, he's identifying the problem. He's speaking out against these crazy standards that some women have. He's speaking out against this idea, this materialistic idea, capitalist idea of women delaying marriage for the purpose of education and career. And then you have some of these brain-dead, airhead Muslim speakers, these sheikhas and ustazas that are saying that, yeah, you need to go get your PhD, forget about marriage. Just later, you can have kids later. They're feeding into this destructive advice. They're feeding into this phenomenon of lack of marriage, lack of strong, healthy families. So it's a sad situation. So you have these incels making these kinds of arguments, and another point that the incels make, actually, which is, I think, interesting. They say that these the Magatals, they criticize for a number of reasons, but one of their main criticisms is, okay, Magatals, you're going to go your own way, and then you think that women can't take advantage of you, but you're deluded because you're still paying taxes, aren't you? You're still paying taxes, and guess which sex is the main benefactor of the taxes that you're paying? The main benefactor of those taxes are women, through social programs, basically, through welfare, social programs. All of that money that is being spent on your taxes, it's going to women. It's going to women. So you can't escape this problem by going your own way. So this is a good point. This is a good point. And the point that they're making is that there's a bigger structural problem with society. Do they have the solution? Do these incels have the solution? No. They're wandering in the darkness. They need Islam. They need Islam. They've identified the problem, but they don't have the solution. What are the themes of Red Pill? There are many themes, and I won't be able to cover all of them, but I want to describe some of the main themes and show how they're connected to Islam, or they are reflected within Islam and Islamic values. So I already mentioned the wisdom of patriarchy, qawama, the leadership of men. This is found throughout Islam. And you have hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, "Kullukum ra'in." All of you are shepherds. All of you are responsible for your flock. And the husband is responsible for his family. The wife, the mother, is responsible for her children. The imam is responsible for his community. But in this hadith, it's very interesting because the husband is mentioned first, and he's mentioned as being responsible for his entire family. And I already mentioned al-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa, that men are the authorities, caretakers, protectors over women. And this is because what Allah has favored them over others, as mentioned in the ayah. So this is something that is enshrined within Islam. It's found within the Quran and the Sunnah. And when we look at the lives of the Sahaba, when we look at the Khulafa, we never see any endorsement of this idea that men and women should be equal in terms of their authority within marriage. Nowhere do we see this idea of equality of the sexes between men and women when it comes to leadership of the community. Nowhere do we find any kind of statement from the Prophet ﷺ, from any of the Khulafa, from any of the Sahaba, that says that women have to be represented in these leadership positions. And you don't find any of that. All of this is a modernist, feminist incursion into Islam, a distortion into Islam. So the wisdom of patriarchy. There are so many benefits to this. And again, we can't include all of this discussion in this particular video. We do have a course at Al-Asna called Vanishing Throne. It's a course that's dedicated to explaining the wisdoms of men's leadership and the harms that come from women's leadership, because this seems like a irrational aspect of Islam that non-Muslims are criticizing Islam for, and some Muslim women and men have doubts about Islam. These are some of the shubuhat that are plaguing parts of the Muslim community, where people have this standard of absolute equality between men and women. But Islam, when we look at the Quran and Sunnah, it says no. There's the Sahih Hadith, well-known Hadith. No one disputes its authenticity, where the Prophet ﷺ says that no people will be successful, no people will flourish, that they put their administrative affairs, like political affairs, in the hands of women, that they put women in charge over them. And the scholars of Islam interpreted this hadith as political leadership and also judgeship, being judges. So they prohibited that. All scholars prohibited that. The Amir of the community, the Khalifa of the community, it can't be a woman. It can't be a woman. When it comes to Imam, being the Imam, there are no female Imams to lead men in prayer or to lead the Friday prayer. This is something that is indisputable within Islam. But this is all patriarchal. So you either accept Islam as it is, or you reject it. You try to introduce all of this deviance because of a feminist influence, but that's not Islam, that's deviance. So qawama is not one. Another major theme of Red Pill is hypergamy. Hypergamy is about what women find attractive. That's basically what it is. Men's attraction is usually a given. What are men attracted to in a spouse, in a wife? What are men attracted to? And it's very obvious what men are attracted to. Men are attracted to certain look. Men are attracted to certain body types. Men are attracted to certain kinds of beauty. That's known. That is something that's very obvious. But what attracts women? And what Red Pill talks about, what biology, non-Red Pill biology talks about, what non-Red Pill psychology talks about. They try to map out, well, what is exactly women's attraction all about? And it's different from a man's attraction. Men are attracted to women based primarily on physical looks. There are other components of attraction for men, but the main thing is physical looks. The main thing for women is not necessarily physical looks. Physical looks is a big part of it. But another very big part of what a woman finds attractive is status. What is a man's status in society? Is he at high status? Is he low status? So what makes a man high status? What makes a man low status? It's a variety of factors. A man might be high status because he's rich. A man might be high status because he is funny and entertaining, and people just love him because he has such a great personality. He can entertain people. That gives him high status. Some men have high status because they're physically strong. Some men have high status because they're physically tall. They're just tall people, and that confers on them a high status within society or within their tribe or within their group. And then in Muslim societies, for example, high status can be related to your nasab, your lineage. Not just Muslim society, many societies. Are you royal blood? Do you have this royal lineage, or do you have this lineage from the nobles of society, of history? This is also found in Islam. Your nasab is important. That can give you a higher status. Your education level, that can give you a higher status. So all of this is not like a simple formula, but the basic idea is that status, women are attracted to higher status men. In particular, they're attracted to men who are higher status than themselves. So the practical reality of this is that if you have a woman who is a millionaire, she's making a lot of money, she's in general going to not be attracted, all else being equal, to men who make less money than she does. All else being equal. This is important. Okay, if you want to make meaningful comparisons, you have to hold all things equal. So if you had this millionaire woman and she has two potential mates, one, they're both exactly the same in terms of their looks. They're exactly the same in terms of their lineage. They're exactly the same in all of these different dimensions, except one difference. One of them makes $1 million a year, The other one makes only $10,000 a year, and he's homeless because of that, because of such low income. Which one is she going to find more attractive? All else being equal, she's going to be more attractive to the guy pulling in 7 figures every year. That's just basic female psychology. And it's not like 1 or 2 or 3 studies that show this. This is so well known. It's like saying the sky is blue. Like, what are the studies that prove that the sky is blue? You don't need to cite studies. This is something that's so well known and so well attested for across all literature, psychological literature, biological literature, everything. And common experience, like wake up, smell the coffee. This is called hypergamy. So this is all about status. What women find attractive is very closely tied to the status of men. But feminism denies this altogether. Feminism doesn't acknowledge that this exists. And I'll tell you why in a second, but recognize the difference between men and women. Women have this status, this concern with status. It's not necessarily conscious either. It's not a conscious, oh yeah, I'm looking for money. It's not just like a man's attraction. It's not necessarily conscious. He unconsciously or subconsciously is attracted to certain body types or certain looks, physical attributes. Now, if you had 2 women, they're exactly the same in terms of everything, except one makes more money and one makes less money. Who is the man going to choose? You know, it's not going to be a very clear case. In some cases, he might choose the one who is richer, or in some cases, he might choose the one who's poorer. He might prefer that. You're not going to find overwhelmingly men are going to make, you know, a decision about what they're attracted to based on status. They're primarily concerned about looks. This is the way that Allah has created men. And it can be a test. This can be fitna. This can be a test for men. It is a fitna. It's one of the biggest fitna. But the test for women, it also has a component of physical attraction. But this is another aspect, or the main aspect of female attraction is status. So feminism denies this. Feminism says that, no, you know, marriage needs to be about partnership. Men and women equal partners in a marriage. I mean, the feminists that even endorse marriage. A lot of feminists want to destroy marriage, and they say marriage itself needs to be abolished. Some feminists will say that marriage needs to be abolished exactly because of this hypergamy. Because women, if they just go on the basis of their natural desires, they're going to be hypergamous, and they're going to choose to marry men who are higher status than them, and therefore will have more power over them. And that's inequality, and that's a cause for oppression. So for that reason, we have to abolish marriage. And then another group of feminists will go even a step further and say this is why women need to be either celibate or become lesbians. Because we don't want to perpetuate this biological patriarchy. They'll acknowledge that patriarchy is biological. And so in order to destroy patriarchy, you have to just abstain from marriage entirely or become a lesbian. Or technology can change people's, the female mind and change female hormones, and basically so that you can engineer what women are attracted to. That's really the goal of feminism ultimately. That's what they would love to do, to physically change men and women so that men and women are exactly equal. And in fact, there's no gender, because you can be whatever gender that you want. So that means there's no gender, naturally. This is what feminism is striving to. Okay? How many of these du'at that are railing against red pill, how many of them are talking and telling you about the technological threat to humanity at the hands of feminists? You know, that reminds me of this certain meme that I made this meme actually. You know, simp imams for 200 plus years of feminism being used by colonial powers to justify invasions and occupation, to destroy Muslim society and dismantle Muslim family. I sleep. You know, these imams are sleeping. They don't have anything to say. They don't have any, you're not going to see any videos. They might make some criticisms here and there. Yeah, the extremist feminists, they don't really understand these issues. And then, but if someone shares a red pill meme, or someone mentions, okay, now this is some real stuff. Now we got to go to bat and we have to pound our chest and people are just embarrassing themselves. So hypergamy, this is something that is acknowledged in Islam. I'll give you proof of that. Okay, because in Islam, in fiqh, we have the idea of kafa'a. kafa'a, which can roughly be translated into suitability. So if you go to the books of fiqh and you read about nikah, marriage, they mentioned, all of the madhahib will mention what is suitability when you marry your daughter. Because marriage can't happen without the wali, without the male relative. You have to have the wali for the nikah to take place, according to the majority opinion. So what is the wali's responsibility towards his daughter or to his female relative? What is his responsibility? He has to make sure that this is a suitable marriage. And if it's not suitable, if the man is not suitable because he doesn't make enough money, he doesn't have a good reputation, he's actually known as a kind of a bum, he's known as a kind of being, maybe he's a fasiq, maybe he's like an open sinner, maybe he's a zindiq, maybe he's an open deviant, okay? So the wali is responsible. He has to do his due diligence to make sure that this is a good marriage. He has a responsibility to take care of his ward. The English word is ward. So he is responsible for her. And if he doesn't do his due diligence, then he is sinful, actually. He is considered to be sinful. And he might lose his status as a wali because of that. But it's interesting, like, status is so clearly acknowledged in fiqh that in Al-Hidayah, for example, Hanafi fiqh, this masterful work of Hanafi fiqh, it mentions that even a man who is being mocked by children, or, he's seen as kind of like a loser, basically. Like, that's something that you should take into consideration. So what does this mean? It means these are considerations. Are they saying that, no, it's haram to marry a man who's being mocked by people? No, they're not saying that. They're saying, look at the whole picture, just like any rational human being would. Look at the whole picture and make sure that this is a suitable marriage. The point being that Islam takes into consideration human psychology, basic human biology. Because if imagine saying that, the most important thing is religiosity. The most important thing and the only thing is religiosity. How much taqwa does this person have? How much taqwa? That's the only thing, right? We care about the akhirah. The akhirah is the ultimate goal. So only marry on the basis of taqwa. Is this what the Prophet ﷺ said? Is this what the Quran teaches? Is this what Islam is about? Close your eyes to looks, close your eyes to status, close your eyes to wealth, close your eyes to nasab, close your eyes to beauty, reputation. Islam doesn't say that. The Prophet ﷺ explicitly tells you to factor in these other things. And there's an example of a Sahabi who came to the Prophet ﷺ and told the Prophet ﷺ that he had gotten married. And the Prophet ﷺ asked, did you see her before you married her? Did you see her? And the Sahabi said, no, I didn't see her. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, no, well, go back and see her. You need to see who you're marrying. And this is something that will increase love. This will increase your compatibility and your attraction. So the Prophet ﷺ is acknowledging the importance of beauty. He acknowledged explicitly the importance of nasab. He acknowledged explicitly the importance of mal. The most important factor is taqwa. The most important factor is one's piety and relationship with Allah. That's the most important, but it's not the only factor. Other factors are important. This is the beauty of Islam, because it is guidance for human beings as human beings. It's guidance for perfection of character. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't sent except to perfect character, to perfect us as human beings to the best of our human ability. Islam is not a denial of human nature. Islam doesn't say be celibate. Islam doesn't say, close your eyes to every other factor and just, only consider religiosity. No, that's not a part of Islam. The most important factor is taqwa, is piety, religiosity, knowledge of Islam. Those are the most important things, but you have to be attracted to who you marry. And for men, physical beauty is very important. There's nothing wrong with that. And for women, status is important. Should that be the end all, be all? Oh, I'm not going to marry you unless you make 6 figures. I'm not going to marry you unless you can buy me a big house and a fancy car and the best designer clothes. No, that's not good either. You don't go to the extreme. But does that mean that you have no consideration for whether a man can support you? A potential husband can support you in life and provide for you and provide for your children. You just have to have realistic standards, and you have to weigh them against these other factors like taqwa, like looks, like nasab, like his family background, like his status, all of these things. That's the way a normal human being, guided by the Quran and Sunnah, approaches marriage. So the main point that Red Pill is making is that hypergamy is a reality, status is a reality, perfect equality between husband and wife in a marriage is going to lead to less attractiveness. As I mentioned, if the man and women are equal in the marriage, that's contrary to hypergamy. The woman is actually, all else being equal, she's going to be less attracted to her husband as opposed to if her husband had been higher status than she is. This is acknowledged very clearly, explicitly in the deen, in Islam. Another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, when one of you proposes to a woman, if he can look at that which may encourage him to go ahead and marry her, let him do so. This acknowledges that beauty is a factor in getting married. And for women, status is a factor. It's a factor. It's not the end all be all. It's a factor. So another red pill theme, defending the concept of masculinity and femininity. This is very important in Islam. In Islam, we have rujula, manhood, muru'a, chivalry. These are important things, and they can't exist unless you clearly distinguish male from female. You have to have distinct concepts of male and female. What does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? People are confused about this. Some Muslims, unfortunately, are very confused about this. You ask them, what does it mean to be feminine? They can't say it. They just don't have an answer. They get stuck. They don't want to say something that will be contradictory to woke, social justice, feminist norms, right? They want to be politically correct. They want to be inclusive as possible. So don't say like, oh, being feminine means being compassionate and kind and gentle and modest and motherly and caring. They won't say that anymore. Even though it's obvious this is what it means to be feminine. They won't say that because it might offend someone. It might contradict, LGBT doctrine. It might contradict being woke. It might contradict social justice. Maybe that's the problem. Feminism destroys. It says masculinity is toxic. Masculinity, wanting to be a leader, wanting to be brave, wanting to be courageous, wanting to be strong, wanting to be competitive, wanting to lead people, wanting to be a caretaker, wanting to sacrifice for a higher cause. These are masculine traits. Can women be brave? Yeah, they can be brave too. Can women want to sacrifice? Yeah, they can sacrifice, but those aren't primarily the qualities, according to Islam, of what it means to be a woman versus being a man. In Islam, there's a clear difference between men and women. And Allah says this or it's mentioned in the Quran. Laysa dhakaru kal untha. The male is not like the female. You have distinct male and female realms. Defense of gender roles is another part of a lot of red pill. What does it mean to be a husband? There's a specific role. What does it mean to be a wife? There are specific roles. What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a mother? There are specific roles within the marriage. Islam is very clear on this. On Muslim Skeptic recently we published, like, what is the responsibility of a wife to do housework? Is there a responsibility in Islam? Yes, there is a responsibility for women, for wives to do housework and to maintain the household. This is the dominant position. This is the dominant position within Islam. So you can read that paper and see all of the evidences, all of the sahabiyat that were what we now call housewives. All of the wives of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mothers of the believers. They were cooking, they were cleaning, they were taking care of children. That was their primary role. What do these feminist sheikhs say? The only example of the sahabiyat that they teach are the ones that go and fight in battle, supposedly, quote unquote, fight in battle. They only cite these examples. They cherry pick basically, and they leave out the context. They leave out the context that, look, the women who were fighting, it was an existential threat to the Muslim community where the enemies of Islam are about to wipe out Muslims. So everyone has to contribute in order to ward off the impending genocide or doom. That's a different context than what you're saying. You're saying that, oh yeah, women can just choose to go and fight in the front lines. These sheikhs are using these examples so that they can destroy the idea of gender roles, that they can destroy the idea of femininity. That's what they're trying to do with these stupid lectures that they're giving all around the world. This is a feminist project to destroy the family. They're a part and parcel of that project. So Islam is very clear. Men have unique roles. I mentioned Khalifa, being the Amir, being the Imam, being Rabbul Bayt, being the master of your house. Those are men's roles. And women have roles that are extremely important. Extremely important roles of being mothers, of being caretakers, of being the glue that holds the family together, the glue that holds society together. There's a reason why the Prophet ﷺ is saying that Jannah is underneath the feet of the mother. Or it's reported that the Prophet ﷺ said that. So there's a reason, because of this, how important mothers are, how important women are. I'm not denying the importance of women, the value of women, the importance of their role, but they're distinct roles. That's the point that I'm making. This is one of the themes of Red Pill. Critique of homosexuality, critique of gender fluidity. That's a part of Red Pill as well. Concern with what is natural. This is another big theme of Red Pill. There's a lot of concern with what is natural biology, and this goes contrary to a lot of modern academia, especially the liberal arts. It goes contrary to a lot of these theories like critical race theory, goes contrary to basically social constructivist postmodernism. What postmodernism says is that everything is a social construction. So if you think that you are masculine, this is just an illusion because it's something that society has indoctrinated you with. If you think that you're a modest Muslimah and that you need to cover yourself, this is a social construction. Your feelings of modesty and your attitudes towards covering and separation of genders, that is just indoctrination. You've been brainwashed by a certain culture, by a certain society. There's no natural objective basis to any of that. This is what postmodernism teaches. This is what the fourth wave intersectional feminists are teaching. They're saying that patriarchy is also structural racism. It's also white supremacy. All of these things are connected. But the point that I'm making is that a lot of what many Red Pill thinkers, academics say is that no, there's a biological reality. Patriarchy is not just a social construction. How could it be a social construction when all of these independent cultures, all of these independent civilizations were patriarchal, even though they had no influence on each other? So 99% of humanity discovered independently the value of patriarchy and implemented it. The only reason that can happen, or the only viable way that can happen, is if this is something embedded into our nature. That's the only explanation for how all these people could have independently established basically the same kind of system. But the feminists will say no. There is no biological basis for it. This is all just indoctrination. All we need to do is teach people. So this is what happened with Afghanistan. They said, we're going to enlighten these Afghans. They've been suffering under the Taliban. These Afghan women who have been wearing the burqa, they claim that they're wearing the burqa and they're following Islam and they're staying at home because of it's their choice and they're happy with that and they like it. They say that because they've been brainwashed. We're going to go as the US with our NGOs and with all of these different programs, and we're going to educate the Afghan women and show them how much better their lives can be, how much more they can enjoy life and freedom. And once we teach them that, we're going to re-engineer the culture, and they will realize that, okay, within a few years, Afghanistan is going to be like San Francisco. Within a decade, Afghanistan is going to be exactly like New York City, Times Square in Kabul. That's really what they believe. They don't realize that, well, there's going to be resistance because not only is this contrary to Islam, the program that you're proposing, it's also going fundamentally against people's nature, human nature. They don't want that. They'll reject that. And they did reject it. And they're surprised. They're shocked. Why? We have basically neutralized the bad Islamists. This is what their army was saying. We've neutralized the bad Islamists. We've provided complete protection for these women. So they're not under any compulsion, but they yet they still reject our Western social system, our social program, our pushing them to go get educated, to leave their families and find a job, to leave their children and find a job. Don't get married. Don't have children. Wait until you're 40 to start a family. They rejected that. Oh, what a surprise. So the red pill is more in touch with reality than this dominant feminist system. Another red pill theme that's important is simping. Acknowledging this process or this idea of simping. What is a simp? And there are varying definitions of what a simp is. The definition that I go by, I think it's a very relevant definition, is someone who violates Islamic principles in order to appeal to feminist sensibilities, feminist sensitivities, female sensitivities. So the simp is basically someone who says, we should give women everything that they want. Or a simp is someone who says that, polygyny is really not necessary. It's really uncalled for. Like, why would a man get a second wife or a third wife or a fourth wife? This is unnecessary. It's bad. It's haram. It's makruh. It's something that it's better to avoid. This is what a simp is, because in Islam, getting a second wife could be wajib. It could be required of you to get a second wife in certain circumstances. And all the schools of thought acknowledge this and recognize this. There's no difference of opinion that getting a second wife could be, in certain circumstances, actually required. Why? Because you are suffering from, or you have heightened shahawat. Your shahwa is very strong. And it's not, your wife that you have is not able to satisfy that. Then you are in danger of falling into zina. Then getting a second wife becomes wajib on you in that very specific circumstance. Also granted that you can support a second wife and make sure that you are supporting her and meeting her needs financially. There are other conditions there, but it takes the ruling of wajib. So a simp would just deny this, would just deny all this. Or a simp is someone who says, women should be the leaders of our community. You're violating a clear principle of Islam by saying that. You're violating a principle of Islam. Why? You're catering to a feminist sensibility. So we should call it out. We should call that out. What some in the Red Pill movement have recognized is that a lot of religions are destroyed because of simping. Why? They've recognized that, look, with Christians, for example, if it was just feminists in academia or in these social justice movements that were calling for church reforms, religious reform, more in line with feminist values, the Christian community would completely ignore that. And so there would be no effect on the Christian community. This feminist poison wouldn't get into the community. But there are these simps, basically Christian ministers, pastors, bishops, whatever, that say, we need to really, make sure we have more equality in the church. We've been really bad in terms of women's rights and equality. We need to really maybe start having women pastors. Maybe we need to start ordaining women ministers. Maybe we need to have more women singing. And I know we used to have this policy of women covering their heads when they came in church, but that seems unnecessary. Why should women cover their heads in church? They can dress however they want. If they want to dress like a prostitute, that's fine. It's called sex positivity. What's wrong with that? And maybe, before we were saying that women shouldn't be sleeping around, men shouldn't be sleeping around, but that's shaming. We can't shame people. That's wrong. So it's the actual members of the Christian church, whatever denomination, they're introducing all of these feminist ideas to their own communities. Basically, they are simp pastors, simp ministers, a simp pope, and this is going to destroy basically all of the values and rituals of the church. It's going to destroy the church. That's what has happened. It's not happening. It's happened. Like, it's a done deal at this point, unfortunately, except for small pockets. They want to do the same thing with Islam. We have our version of the simp ministers who are simp du'at. They are violating, whether it's through their ignorance or deliberately, they're throwing all of the patriarchal values of Islam under the bus in favor of these feminist ideals. And they're doing it in a very mindless, stupid, uncritical way. So if, and they're traveling, they're going to all of these different countries in the Muslim world, working with NGOs, Western NGOs, funded by these feminists, atheists, sometimes funded by the government itself, mostly funded by the government through backdoors. They're going to these countries and they're spreading feminism. They're saying, Muslim families need to be reformed. We need more of this equality between husband and wife. So this is simping. You can talk about treating your family well, treating women well, treating your daughters well, being a good provider, being a good father, being a good leader, being a good husband. I talk about that sometimes. That's not simping, because you're teaching Islam. Islam teaches men to be good husbands, loving husbands who cherish their families. That's what Islam teaches. So saying that is not simping. Simping is when you violate Islam. You say something that is contrary to the letter or the spirit of Islamic law in order to appease feminist sensibilities. So this is a very important distinction, and we need like a whole entire video, courses, teaching books, talking about this, writing about this, acknowledging this. Now we don't have people acknowledging it, unfortunately. At least not on social media. I hardly see anyone. And the few people that do speak out against this simping culture and this feminist, toxic feminism, they get slammed. They get criticized, nitpicked, told to shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. No, these brothers trying their best. They're trying their best. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. Okay, so we need to teach them and correct them and help them. But the core message is important. It's solid. We have to help them hone that, support them in doing that. I want to support them. I want to support them in that because we're part of the same team. So those were some of the themes of Red Pill that explicitly are found in Islam. What about the bad stuff about Red Pill, the things that contradict Islam? So these are views that you will find amongst some of these Red Pill speakers that I mentioned. I mentioned people like Kevin Samuels. I mentioned people like Rollo Tomasi, people like Roger Devlin, all of these different people. They will have some views that are objectionable and highly offensive and just downright wrong. What are these? Number one, sometimes you find denigrating portrayals of women. Like very offensive statements about women, like women are trash, or women are, XYZ, or someone is a divorced woman, that automatically means she's garbage. This is not right. This is not right. And we don't accept that in Islam. But is denigrating women and calling women trash, is that a necessary, essential part of Red Pill? No. Okay. And that's number one. Number two, I mentioned they consider circumcision of boys genital mutilation. So obviously we don't agree with that. But again, that's not a core part of Red Pill. Sometimes they use very bad language, vulgar language, offensive language. Sometimes they use racially charged language or racial slurs. We don't accept that. And we denounce that. Sometimes they promote zina. They promote dating. Like the pickup artists. How can you pick up women so you can sleep with as many women as possible? Some of those people are labeled as Red Pill. Do we accept that? No. Some of them promote, instead of promiscuity, they promote celibacy, like the Haqiqatjous. Do we accept celibacy? Do we say that no, people shouldn't be getting married, people should just abandon the whole idea of the opposite sex? No, that's contrary to Islam. But again, that's not a core part of what Red Pill is. And then promotion of hyper-materialism. Like the most important thing is making money and sleeping around. Some within the Red Pill movement are promoting ideas like this. Do we accept it? No, we reject it. And racism, again, some of these Red Pill guys are racists, and they will say very offensive, wrong things about blacks, about Hispanics, about Asians. Okay, look at some of the things that they'll say about Asians. Some of them, some figures, not even the majority, just a minority. But that's not what Red Pill is about. These are just people who are associated by others. They might not even necessarily use the word Red Pill. They might not even say, I'm a Red Pill person. But they're associated by others in this, broad umbrella. Red Pill is not like a club that, okay, you're in or you're out. It's like a label that's used, and some people who are in or labeled as such don't adopt that label, such as myself. You have a bunch of these feminists online who say, yeah, Daniel is this red pill, right, alt-right, extremist, whatever. I never said I support the alt-right. I never said I support the right. I never said I support, or I never called myself a men's rights advocate or activist. I never used those terms for myself. Never said that I stand by red pill as this is what we should follow and I'm part of the red pill movement. I've never said that. But they ascribe that to me. So in a short on YouTube, I mentioned this phrase, take the good, leave the bad. Take the good, leave the bad. And this is known as خُذْ مَا صَفَى وَدَعْ مَا كَدِرْ. Take what is pure and leave what is dirty or sullied. And this is something that's permissible in Islam, but it has conditions. It has conditions. Who is in a position to take the good and leave the bad? And the main condition for those who say it's permissible is tamyiz. Tamyiz. Tamyiz means being able to distinguish what is good and what is bad. So someone who has a shallow understanding of Islam, someone who has a shallow understanding of the issue in question, they can't really do tamyiz. They can't really do tamyiz because they're not informed. So their opinion is meaningless and they won't be able to distinguish what is good or what is bad. So some people will have this argument like, okay, red pill has these bad elements. Therefore, we should just drop the whole thing and denounce it. So I want to make myself very clear here. What is the difference? Because I say that feminism is just toxic and I denounce it. I've been denouncing it for the past 10 years. In 2014, I remember writing an article from Muslim Matters where I wrote something about how the sexual freedom that feminism promotes is contrary to modesty, it's contrary to decency, and it's promoting women to dress in provocative ways to express their sexual freedom. But that causes an increase in sexual violence, it causes an increase in sexual assault, it causes an increase in catcalling. And we're not trying to blame the victim. We shouldn't blame the victim in those cases. And the perpetrators of that are the criminals and are guilty, and we denounce them. But why don't we recognize feminism's role in promoting sexual freedom and promiscuity and all of this bad stuff, immodesty? That was the article. It was like a very simple argument, and I got hammered by all these feminists. And I was tarred and feathered, essentially. So the point that I'm trying to make with that is this was way before this idea of a red pill movement as such or manosphere had come into the mainstream. It's in 2014, 7 years ago. But they're applying this kind of label to people. And the point that I wanted to make is that you can't really leave everything that includes these bad ideas. Because if you're in school, if you're in college, you're reading biology, you're reading engineering, you're reading computer science. Many of these texts and courses are taught by non-Muslims. And there are certain elements of those disciplines that are contrary to Islam. Studying medicine. If you study medicine, they teach evolutionary biology, that all human beings are evolved from apes and pre-hominids. That's contrary to Islam. You have any kind of interaction with the world, whether it's through reading, whether it's through social media, whether through all of this has bad elements mixed within it. You as a Muslim have to be grounded in Islam, in the correct Islamic aqidah, correct Islamic fiqh, understanding of correct Islamic practice. You have to be intelligent enough and grounded enough with basic Islamic literacy, basic Islamic education. And what that means is a whole other video. But you have to be in that position to be able to interact with the modern world without losing yourself. This is the case for everything. So this medicine, for example, that you study in college, it has evolution in it. It has promotion of zina in it. Like if you study psychiatry, they have this idea that to be a sexually healthy, psychologically healthy adult, you have to be sexually active, even if you're not married. This is contrary to Islam. So should we say that no Muslim should study medicine? No Muslim should study psychiatry or be in these fields? Maybe you'll say that. But I think a lot of people would have difficulty saying that, or would have difficulty saying that Muslims shouldn't go to college. Don't go to college, because many of the things that are being taught are contrary to Islam, being taught by non-Muslims. Don't go to college. Your iman is at stake. Well, it might be at stake if you're not educated in Islam, if you're not grounded in Islam, if you haven't done the due diligence to learn your deen and to protect yourself intellectually from these bad influences. Anything, any social media, TV, internet. Why connect to the internet? There's a lot of wrong things on the internet. Don't turn on the internet. Keep it closed. So that's on one side. On the other side, there are ideologies that are so bad at their core that we should just reject them wholesale and everything associated with them. And feminism is one of those. Liberalism is one of those. Secularism is one of those. But let me explain. With feminism in particular, the core of feminism is a rejection of patriarchy. If I ask someone, are you a feminist? And he says, yes, I'm a feminist. And I asked, do you think that patriarchy is good? And he says, yeah, I think patriarchy is great. Perfectly valid. Okay, then you're not really a feminist. You're not really a feminist, because you cannot be a feminist if you think patriarchy is good, if you think men should have authority and leadership over women. You're not really, and no feminist will recognize you as a feminist. Okay, so rejection of patriarchy is core to what feminism is. And the core of feminism is contrary to Islam. And this is why feminism as a whole has to be rejected. Do you understand this? Red pill, okay, you have some of these guys that are labeled as red pill, that they are promoting dating. We reject that, right? Just like in medicine, we reject the evolution stuff. But the core of medicine is not evolutionary theory. And the core of red pill is not dating and doing zina and committing zina. That's not the core of it. In fact, arguably, it's a peripheral kind of thing, if at all. So we can ask some of these people associated with red pill, we can say, okay, you're red pill? Yes. Do you think that people should commit zina? Or people should be pickup artists and go dating and stuff? Some of them will say no, but they're still legitimately considered part of the red pill movement. Do you see the distinction there? Not every ideology is the same. Not every one of these different ideologies, like modern medicine is a modern ideology. So this is the principle. Take the good and leave the bad. It comes with conditions, and one of the main conditions is tamyiz. If you don't have that, be honest with yourself. If you don't have that, then you should avoid medicine. I'll say that with not only red pill, with medicine as well. If you are not grounded in basic Islamic aqidah to know about Adam alayhi salam and how Allah created him uniquely, and that Adam alayhi salam does not have parents, he does not have a mother, he does not have a father, he wasn't evolved. If you do not know this, then, or it brings you great amount of doubt, then you should not go into medicine. You should not go into medicine. You should not go into certain fields of biology. Yeah, so this applies across the board. This is for everything. But certain ideologies are worse because at their core, they are toxic at their core. They're contrary to Islam at their core. This is also part of tamyiz, to be able to distinguish different ideologies as an intelligent person. But there are requirements. You have to have the requisite knowledge for that. Some of these guys, as I mentioned, they are shallow in their understanding of all of these things, Islamic topics and these philosophies. Doesn't matter, like they use big words. Oh, you need a dictionary because the guy, looks up in the thesaurus what a word is. Okay, don't be fooled by big words. I mean, why use big words? The whole point of communication, and actually this is a part of balagha too. Balagha doesn't mean using fancy words and using all of these different rhetorical devices and metaphors, tashbih, isti'ara, and all of these different things in balagha. No, being baligh, being eloquent means that you are able to communicate properly with your audience so that they understand exactly what you're saying and they get what you're saying. What is the most effective way to do that? And then in some of these books of balagha, like al-balagha al-wadiha, it'll describe different types of speech. So what does it mean to be baligh, to be eloquent in a khutbah versus when you're writing a letter, versus when you are teaching a science, as opposed to when you're writing poetry. All of these different types of communication will have different standards of eloquence, and you have to know what is eloquent in what context. So just because someone is using big words, or they Even me, like if I use big words, if I cite different studies and I pretend like I am a really educated person, don't be deluded by that. Look at what is the message. Does it make sense? Evaluate me, evaluate all these speakers who speak on this topic. Use your mind. Okay? Use your mind. Don't be deluded. Don't be tricked by charlatans. Okay, so why not have the same approach with feminism? Again, I have the same approach with everything. Take the good and leave the bad if you meet the requirements and the conditions that I mentioned. If you are not educated, you're not grounded in Islam, you haven't studied these basic aspects of Islamic Aqidah, then don't go into any of these topics. Maybe stay off the internet as a whole. Okay? So this equating, saying that feminism and red pill are two sides of the same coin, this is just moronic. Okay, they're not the same. They're not two sides of the same coin. Red pill is not being used to destroy Islam, but feminism is being used to destroy Islam. Feminism is being used to destroy traditional religion, to destroy marriage, to destroy families. Red pill is not doing any of that. Some of the arguments within red pill will help families, will help marriages. Some of them, the ones that are in line with Islam. Here's an analogy for you. Just like for the people who say that, oh, feminism and red pill, they're two sides of the same coin. We reject them both. They're both equally bad. Well, if I told you this, atheism and theism are two sides of the same coin. Sam Harris and C.S. Lewis are two sides of the same coin. They're both equally bad. We equally reject them. If you don't know Sam Harris, he's a rabid Islamophobe, anti-Muslim atheist who's constantly attacking Muslims, who has said we need to nuke, maybe we need to use nuclear weapons on Mecca. That's Sam Harris. C.S. Lewis is a modern traditional Christian writer. He's a Christian. He writes about all kinds of positive beliefs about God, valuing faith. Are these two sides of the same coin? It'd be stupid to suggest that. It would be stupid to say that we're equating Sam Harris with C.S. Lewis. Okay, it means that you don't know anything. You're ignorant. You don't know who C.S. Lewis is. You can't comprehend the basic distinction between the two. Okay, so yeah, I'm not saying adopt C.S. Lewis wholesale. I'm not saying go be the murid of C.S. Well, he died, but don't go and be dedicated, a devotee of C.S. Lewis wholesale. I'm not saying that. But if you're solidly grounded in Islam, it's not going to cause you to doubt. It's not going to cause you to be confused. You know what is correct Aqidah. You're not tempted by the Trinity somehow, the Christian Trinity. I don't think there's anyone who's really tempted by the Trinity to fall into believing in that. But if you meet those conditions, then C.S. Lewis has interesting things to say that you can read, and everything that's good that he has said is found in Islam too. Is found in Islam too. So there's nothing wrong with recognizing that. There's nothing wrong with recognizing that. And there's a precedent in Islam for this. With what? With Jahili poetry. Jahili poetry. So Islamic scholars study the mu'allaqat, for example. These are pre-Islamic poets. And they are considered to use the best Arabic language, human Arabic language. Obviously, the Quran is superior to all of that. But in terms of human language, the mu'allaqat in Arabic are seen as representing the peak of eloquence of the Arabic language. So to better understand the Quran, to better understand Arabic in order to better understand the Quran, they would study different constructions and grammatical structures within the mu'allaqat, within these set of poems. Despite the fact that those poems contain a lot of really haram things. The poetry actually contains scandalous, like very crude, scandalous things are found in that poetry. Read Imr al-Qais. Read Imr al-Qais and see what he's talking about. It's completely un-Islamic, but they would still take what's good. They can do that. They can take what's good, studying the Arabic language, without necessarily adopting the escapades of Imr al-Qais. So. Also, again, this idea that if we read C.S. Lewis or we read some red pill author, whatever, that, this means that Islam is incomplete. That, Islam is incomplete. What? How does that make any sense? So these people, it's like so hypocritical. You will cite all kinds of philosophers, you'll cite all kinds of biblical scholars, you will cite all kinds of academic research. You'll use all of that to back up your arguments, whether it's in a debate or whether it's in a conversation or your articles or whatever. But as soon as something opposes liberal feminist ideology, as soon as something is not politically correct, then, oh no, you can't reject it. We have to pound our chest and make these videos. That makes no sense. How is that consistent? It's not convincing. This is like clowning the issue. Okay? So what prescription are we adding to Islam? Yes, of course, Islam is complete. We don't add anything to Islam. No doubt. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Perfectly agreed on that. Perfectly agreed on that. What is Red Pill saying that we're adding to Islam? Tell me. And if you have tamyiz, again, you'll be able to distinguish what is a part of Islam and what is not a part of Islam. If you're ignorant about Islam, you might think that hypergamy is not a part of Islam. If you're ignorant, you might not realize that patriarchy is a part of Islam, and therefore you will reject Red Pill and you'll say this is all batil. But that's because of your own ignorance of Islam. I mean, again, like someone might say, oh, you're adding to Islam because you use the word patriarchy. Why? Patriarchy is a descriptive term, and Islam is patriarchal. Can you say that Islam is monotheistic? Monotheism is not a word that's found in the Quran. Monotheism, literally, the word, it's an English word, so it's not going to be found in the Quran. Basically, no English term can be used to describe Islam. Is that the position that you're committing yourself to? Well, you're listening to me speak in English, and I'm talking about Islam, and throughout history, you had all kinds of languages being used to talk about Islam. That's permissible. Certain terms are used to speak about Islam. As long as they conform with Islam in meaning, then there's nothing wrong with that. We can say that Islam is patriarchal, Islam is monotheistic. No problem with that. And if certain aspects of Islam are quote unquote red pill, if red pill is just saying that is just a descriptive term in terms of content, then you have no problem with using all kinds of non-Muslim terms for Islam. Islam is against racism. There's no word racism in Islam. You won't find the word racism in the Quran. You won't. There's no word racism in Hadith. So by saying that Islam is against racism, you're actually attributing something to Islam that is not found within Islam. Is that a sensible argument? No, you would say that, well, the teachings of Islam are opposed to racial hatred and racial injustice. You would say that. That's an accurate statement. That's an accurate statement because you're looking at the meaning of the word and whether it applies accurately. Same thing with patriarchy, same thing with any of these terms. Yeah. So, I mean, the bottom line, to wrap it up, if Muslims were correctly advocating the patriarchal principles and gender roles and masculinity and femininity, all of these things that are found in Islam, if we were correctly advocating, if these shuyukh and du'at and speakers, if they were correctly advocating these things on social media, then there wouldn't be this controversy. There wouldn't be this shock and disgust that we see with the basic themes of Red Pill. The fact that these things are not being taught and they're not being conveyed properly on social media, for better or worse, I mean, it's worse, a lot of Muslims are getting all of their information about Islam through social media. This is a dangerous situation. It's an unideal situation, and it's causing a lot of problems. They're getting all of their information from social media, and people are not talking about patriarchy on social media. Part of it is because of censorship. Certain things are getting deleted. I am constantly telling people, don't rely on social media for your information about Islam. If you want to follow me, don't rely on social media. Go to my website directly. Don't rely on these pages that are going to be probably taken down at any time. So these figures who are preaching on social media need to dedicate more time to advocating for patriarchy, for gender roles, for femininity, masculinity, explaining what is marriage value. Like, what is your real value on the Muslim marriage market? There is an objective answer to that question. It's not all, perspectival. It's not all subjective. No. There's an objective value that everyone has on the marriage market. Islam acknowledges that. We have kafa'a, we have the idea of suitability. So these things need to be talked about properly with true Islamic teachings, not this feminized, feminist garbage. So that is my message. I think that if that were happening, then no one would be so scandalized by Red Pill. No one would be making these stupid statements like, oh, feminism and Red Pill, they're the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm really concerned about the Muslim community that is so dependent on social media. And feminism, subhanAllah, is distorting so many minds. So we have to fight back against this by teaching correct Islam, fully based on the Quran, the Sunnah, and the consensus of the ulama and the scholars throughout history, our Islamic tradition. This is my message. We have to stick to that tradition and the ulama, the true scholars of that tradition, which may not be on Facebook. They might not be on Facebook. They might be at your masjid. They might be in your community, but you have to physically go and learn from them. So you have to seek them out, be sincere to Allah, and all guidance and all good is from Allah. Please forgive me if I made any mistake in this long talk on Red Pill. Please forgive me. My intention was not to disturb anyone or to say anything incorrect. Please forgive me, and may Allah forgive me and all of us. Ameen. Jazakallahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.